The bandwidth for this episode of the AR-15 podcast is sponsored by the Firearms Radio Network. Firearmsradio.tv.
Welcome to the AR-15 podcast. This is the podcast about your favorite black rifle. This show is for you. Whether you're building your first AR or you've been building ARs for years, there is something we can all do to take our black rifle to the next level.
You make this show possible by clicking through our Brownells and Amazon affiliate links. The next time you order online, go to AR15podcast.com and click through our Brownells and Amazon affiliate links. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and a small portion of your sale goes to supporting pro-gun radio like the AR-15 podcast. Support the Firearms Network as a whole by pledging your support at patreon.com/FRN.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Tonight I'm going to be here alone doing a solo show, and I wanted to cover the topic of, spending your hard-earned money on some really solid choices that I think are for any build that you might be making. Before we dive into our main topic and explore that a little further, I wanted to once again welcome you all to episode number 136 of the AR-15 podcast. We want to let you know that we have a new source of cool products that has come online, and we'd like to ask you to please go to patriotpatch.co to pre-order the Huckleberry patch, and it's also a good place for you to buy FRN stickers and support the network. I have put in my order for a Huckleberry patch. So I'm real eager to have that come on down. But if you'd like to help out the show and get some really cool patches made, or I guess inspired by the artistic talents of our very own Ryan Cross, then that would be a great place for you to go for us. We also want to remind you that the FRN is going to be at the 2015 Bullpup Shoot in Mount Carroll, Illinois on September 19th. So you've got probably another month or so to go, but we'd like to invite you to go out there and visit the booth and talk to the guys. So in order to get more information, you can go to bullpupshoot.com. So all one word, bullpupshoot.com. So what do I mean about spending your money well, or spending your good money well? I think when it comes down to a basic build, with enough under your belt, I think a lot of people would say that there are some things that they always turn to when they consider the next one as being, critical to anything that they put together. I think in my experience, there's a solid top 10 things that I would incorporate into any build that I make. And some of these are things I've learned through experience. A few of them are things that are part of an evolving base of technology. And I think some of it is because there are plenty of people in the industry that have good ideas, that have a lot more experience than us all, and they share that experience and those concepts with us. And so a word to the wise ought to be sufficient. So let's go ahead and get started with good money well spent. And I think one of the first things that I like to think of as a part of any build I make is a wedge. You may ask what a wedge is, and some of you may not know. I put a link in the show notes. In fact, I put a link in for all of the items we're going to discuss tonight in the show notes. But it is essentially a rubber piece that fits in the lower receiver and the hollow right beneath the rear takedown pin. rear takedown pin. The rubber piece is going to basically add some resistance to the upper receiver, settling down for the rear takedown pin to attach and secure. And that tension is going to create enough force to cause your mated upper and lower receivers to not rattle, to not shake. And with some of the tolerances that you might find, that's a possibility. But the wedge is a really cost-effective way of eliminating some of that play. And right now you can find them at Brownells for $4.99. So in terms of our cost effectiveness, that's a very, very cost effective number. So the next one I want to bring up is something that I think is commonly referred to as a D-ring. The one I put in the show notes is an MGI D-Fender extractor D-ring. And what it is just a little rubber component. It looks very much like a capital D. And it basically is placed over the extractor spring. And it essentially creates additional factors of tension on your extractor. And it is touted as being able to increase your extractor's reliability. So reliable extraction is important in operating a firearm, and this one of ours that we all appreciate, the Black Rifle. It is often thought that many of the complaints about the weapons platform are derived from extractor issues. So this is the engineer's quick fix to that particular problem without having to redesign a bolt carrier or the extractor or any of the other components. And as it sits right now, the Defender extractor is $9.99 at Brownells. So once again, I think that's a pretty good price for what it is offering you in terms of reliability for your rifle. Now, the next one, I was turned on to this item by Michael C., our, I guess, a frequent contributor and now a host of one of the FRN's multiple podcasts. But Michael C. Piped in and giving me some advice on a build with the Superior Shooting Chrome Silicone Buffer Spring. So for all of you that are familiar, you know the typical buffer spring is a piano wire style spring. It's a very thick gauge, round wire that's coiled in the spring. For those of you that don't know what it looks like, then there's your description. So the Superior Shooting Spring is it's a flat wire. So rather than it being a round wire that's coiled, this is a flat wire. And it is a buffer spring that comes from David Tubb. And for any of you who follow the competitive shooting side of the service rifle, David Tubb is probably one of the great legends of the competitive world in terms of using the Black Rifle to shoot his particular class of competitions. So that recoil spring adds several factors of reliability to your rifle when it's installed, and can really smooth out and eliminate a number of your cycling issues that people often talk about in terms of their rifle. So getting one of these as a matter of course and installing it as part of a standard build is, in my opinion, a pretty good, effective use of your resources, since it's only a $25 spring. So, if you're going to spend $12 for a spring that's going to be an integral part of, whatever cycling issues you might have, to essentially spend $12 more to be free of any of those issues, puts this particular item in a very unique category in terms of adding to your reliability once again. $12 is not a great deal of increase over something that you're already going to have in your rifle. You're going to have a buffer spring. So to just have one that's $12 more than the usual, I think really in terms of what we've covered to, at this point in our list, is a very nominal sum to add to the build. So, to put that into a contrast, a standard build doesn't require a wedge. A standard build doesn't require a D-ring. A standard build does require a buffer spring. So that additional cost, the incremental cost of that superior shooting buffer spring over what you would normally find in a basic rifle, is still on par with the same cost you're going to find with the wedge and the D-ring. So I think it's a good buy, and it's, once again, good money well spent. So the next item on my list basically is in terms of the bolt carrier group. Now, 2 years ago, when we began the podcast and we began, talking weekly about the things that we were doing with our rifles and what we liked, you either had a parkerized bolt or you had one that was chrome. And in that amount of time, the technologies have really begun to take hold in the firearms world that are technologies that you've seen elsewhere. Automotive, aerospace, engineering, I think probably the primary places, but they've taken hold in our sport with our rifles, and I don't think that we're ever going to go back to those earlier days. So what I'm talking about are, and I'm just going to throw out 3 common ones, but I think there's probably a dozen more varieties, but we're talking like a nickel boron bolt carrier group, a titanium nitride bolt carrier group, your standard black nitride bolt carrier group. We're seeing more and more bolt carrier groups coming out with these coatings as a part of the factory treatment. They're marketed specifically as being more capable in many areas because of this particular treatment. And I want to point out that, being an integral part of your rifle, the bolt carrier group is going to have to be in every build. So we're only talking about what incremental cost that coating is going to have over the parkerized bolt carrier. So I'm sure that you can find plenty of examples where there is more than 10 or 15 bucks difference between the two, but honestly, I don't know that today it's that significant more often than not. So I've got 3 bolt carrier groups that I've selected for comparison here. The WMD Guns nickel boron bolt carrier group retails for $189.99. So yes, it's a little pricier than what you would ordinarily find on sale, but if we were going to compare retail to retail prices, I don't know that it's fair to pull up what can be very low cost, although perfectly adequate, bolt carrier groups and compare them in our discussion. But if you were going to take $150, $140 bolt carrier group and compare it to $190 bolt carrier group, while the incremental cost is beginning to mount up, I don't think that it's such a huge jump that it would detract from getting a bolt carrier group with a good coating like we were talking about. Now, as far as the titanium nitride, it's a great color. It's kind of a dull gold color, but this titanium nitride example is one that is coming out of Brownell's new product. I guess their prime weaponry is making the product, and Brownell's has begun to carry it. This has just gone on the system recently, and this is a 308 bolt carrier. We're told that they're coming out with a AR-15 5.56 bolt carrier. So the bolt carrier group that has the titanium nitride coating is going to come out. It's going to be on the Brownell's website, and when it does come out, I think that it's probably going to be on par with some of the other offerings. Now, this particular 308 version comes in at $299.99, and the WMD nickel boron bolt carrier group for an AR-10 and 308 is coming in at $219.99. So there's about an $80 difference in the two. That may not be your first choice when it comes to having a bolt carrier with one of these higher end finishes, but I think it's still worth looking at. And our final example is a nitride, the basic black nitride bolt carrier group. And here's one that Brownell's has that they have on their website for $139.99. I think once again you're in that range where you can find comparable parkerized and chromed bolt carriers that are the same price. You're getting the same features. And so I think with these as an example of where you can go on that range, it shows that you can get these more advanced technologies in terms of coatings on your bolt carriers that will increase and enhance some of the concerns people have about the AR-15 or the platform as a whole, because that coating itself creates a bolt carrier group that I think the fancy word they like to use is lubricious. So, whatever the component is it's creating some lubrication in the way that the surface glides against your upper receiver. So I do think that it is a cost-effective, it's good money well spent to buy a bolt carrier group that has a custom coating. I do think it's kind of hard to justify it when you're retrofitting a new nitrided bolt into an old AR that has a parkerized bolt. You're basically taking a perfectly good $100 and some odd part and replacing it with another brand new $100 some odd part. And I don't know that you'll ever be able to take your old bolt and sell it or get as much money out of it as you put into it. But, it's always nice to have spares laying around, and that can be a source for those. But On a brand new build, I think that in my mind, I would always go now with a bolt that's going to really kind of be in that neighborhood. It's going to have those kinds of coatings to add that reliability and that technology to a build that I put forth. So I got the links for all three of those products in the show notes. So, I do suggest taking a look at those. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is something I'm very fond of, because when I was in the Marine Corps, this is the sling that we were trained to use when we were qualifying on the M16. So what I found is something called a military cotton web sling. This is something which is a little more obscure. I don't think that you're going to find it very many places, but I found this one at Creedmoor Sports. And it's labeled a military cotton web sling, 1.25 inches wide. The one we used in the Marine Corps was black. They sell an OD green and a black version. These are essentially the CMP service rifle legal military grade slings. And on the Creedmoor Sports website, they're going for $13.95. Now, you may ask, why do I want to get this old sling? And I would say that really, in terms of getting to know the rifle, in terms of having a basic sling, because some of those slings out on the market can easily be 10 times that cost. In terms of having the basics on your rifle, this is a very low cost start. And understand that with this sling in the Marine Corps at 500 meters with those iron sights I always preach about, I was getting hits. My qual day, I hit 10 out of 10, which is, all they ask you to. So the point is that that's a darn fine start to getting some accuracy if you can learn how to sling up with that thing and get 10 hits on a man-sized target at 500 meters. Now, of course, there's some other fundamentals of marksmanship that go into that, but this sling is a part of that base of knowledge and understanding. So I think that for me, having a sling is important for every build. And if I'm going to have a sling at its most basic, this is the one I'm going to get. Now, of course, as your budget permits, there are a lot of very fine choices that are far more than just this basic sling. But I threw that in there because I have always had a tough time finding them, and now that I have a source, I have enough in my closet to put one on all my rifles. So the next thing I want to touch on is a trigger. And the spectrum of triggers that are available from the very low end to the very high end is so broad, so immense, so very detailed that we're not going to be able to cover any great part of that discussion. But I am going to bring up one trigger, and I'm going to bring it up in the context of what we would typically find in a build. So it's the ALG Defense Advanced Combat Trigger. I've put a link in the show notes for the very item. You can find lower parts kits that have this trigger. And when you build any rifle, if you buy a lower parts kit, you're going to get a basic trigger. It may be very poor metal. I had a gunsmith tell me once that many of the triggers and many of the hammers are not properly hardened. So if you take a file to them, you're going to essentially file off the hardening and everything underneath is pudding. Those are things that don't inspire me with a great deal of confidence with the lowest common denominator grab bag of lower parts kits. And so I like the idea of getting an ALG defense trigger in a lower parts kit because it's going to bring the very quality control components and factors that I've been impressed with from Geissele into this parallel company's products. So to say it another way, ALG Defense is a sister company to Geissele, and everything that ALG Defense has in its catalog is something that has the very same engineering quality and attention to detail that you're going to find on a Geissele trigger. Now, this particular trigger, unlike a lot of the other Geissele triggers, is very reasonably priced. At $65, I think that it is a lot cheaper than you're going to find any other very, highly tuned race gun triggers or precision triggers that you're going to see out there. That cost effectiveness, once again, keeps it well within that, range of, good money well spent. But keep in mind that, if you're already going to have to buy a trigger, accounting for the fact that whatever that trigger is going to cost as part of a lower parts kit or a separate purchase, the incremental cost over that and having this one be your trigger is very nominal. At $65, that's an awesome deal for a great trigger. And to be clear, the thing that makes the advanced combat trigger so very interesting, so very appealing, is that the trigger has a nickel boron coating and the hammer has a nickel Teflon coating. And the disconnector and pins are also nickel Teflon coating. And this basically, the treatment they've done increases the surface hardness and reduces the friction on all of these components. And that's going to affect your trigger pull. And it's going to affect the feel of the trigger when you use it. The grittiness and all of these other detractions that you often hear about are not going to be present in the trigger that I put in my list here. So that, I think, once again, is good money well spent. Now, the next item that I'm going to throw out there is, I think, a little harder to swallow in terms of that whole rationale, but, well, we'll get into it in a sec. You have to pardon me. I'm a little parched and trying to stay ahead of that since I don't have a co-host to give me a break here. So the next item that I think is really important here in terms of my list is an ambidextrous charging handle. Now, I like them because I'm left-handed, and being left-handed, it gives me the ability to natively, operate the rifle in the preferred way that I want. But one of the reasons I think an ambidextrous charging handle would be valuable to anybody is that ambidexterity allows some of your, weak hand, weak side drills to take place without some of the difficulty of having a right-only charging handle. So, for instance, if you're right-handed and your right-only charging handle is designed for your left hand to reach across and basically to press the catch and, operate your charging handle. Well, if you're having to do that, like I did as a lefty, it's real hard to reach across and operate that right-handed charging handle when I'm holding the rifle in my left hand, like someone might have to do in any given circumstance, which would force them to move the rifle to an offhand. But with an AMB charging handle, it eliminates the issue because now you can operate it from either hand using the free hand to work the handle. So it is great as a lefty to be able to finally work the rifle when I'm holding the rifle in my left hand. And so I do appreciate it for that factor, but I do think that there is some crossover value to it. The problem with the charging handle is that natively a charging handle is not very expensive to create. The difficulty comes when you try to make the charging handle do the things that it wasn't designed to do. Then it begins to cost a lot more. So the Raptor charging handle that I prefer myself, list price on Brownells is $86. So put that into perspective. If you go in and look at kind of your standard charging handle, even a Colt charging handle is only $30, while a pretty standard DPMS, double star, high power, high standard, those charging handles are below $20, averaging somewhere in the neighborhood of 15. So yes, you're going to pay $70 more for that charging handle, but at the same time, you're probably going to pay marginally less than that, in the 60, 55, $79 range for a charging handle that still doesn't address the handedness issues, the ambidexterity issues that we're talking about. So I do think that in this instance, it does make sense to put a little thought into how you might have to use the rifle by giving yourself the ability to be more flexible in its operation. Another good charging handle that has really kind of piqued my interest, and I have a few, it's the Mega Arms slide lock charging handle. Now, it's not as expensive as the Raptor is, by about $30. It's $55.72. Wait a minute, no. Let me get to the right thing here. It's $60 here. So $60 on the Brownells website. And that price really, at $26 less, still puts it well ahead of a $15 charging handle, but it is going to do the same thing in terms of increasing your flexibility of operation. So I do think that that is an important part of a build and its considerations. And I do think that even though it is a lot more on a per item basis than your standard, it is good money well spent. So some kind of an ambidextrous charging handle is the recommendation. So on our next item, I think we really begin to cross over into some more broad and general things that I think are important. But I think these are the kinds of things that you are going to run across just in terms of operating your rifle and what your needs are going to be. And of these last three, I'm going to start off with basically a field repair kit. I don't know how many of you have been at the range and have encountered a failure that ultimately causes your rifle to become a paperweight. But when those things do happen, there's really not many places you can go with it. If your firing pin breaks, if your extractor breaks, if you have a crack on bolt face, if you have any issues with your springs, you've essentially got a rifle that's no longer going to work for you. So the idea of a field repair kit, I think, is a pretty nominally valuable accessory for your rifle. With some of the advanced grips, you have some space for storage in the grip. I think I've even seen some foregrips that have space for storage. And the field repair kit I found is a Bushmaster field repair kit for the AR-15, and it retails for $24.99. So it has a firing pin, has the extractor and extractor pins, an extractor springs. It's got a disconnector, gas ring set, gas ring pivot pin, a firing pin, 2 firing pin retaining pins, a cam pin, and a spring package of 6 springs. So, once again, if you're in the middle of needing your rifle and something breaks, unless you have something like this on hand, you're essentially dead in the water. And for what amounts to $25 in investment, you can have something that'll cover a lot of the big failure points. And not even just the failure points. Sometimes you have a screwy thing happen and you got a piece that falls out of a bolt when you pull it out for servicing another issue. You just never know what's going to happen. So in my book, having something like this available, at hand is really, it's good money well spent. The next thing that I think is really important, and I think in a lot of instances it's overlooked, I think it's good quality magazines. And, I don't know that you have to go out and buy only Magpul magazines. I like them. They operate well in my rifles, and I think I've only ever had one rifle that didn't like Gen 2 or Gen 1 magazines. And by and large, every other rifle I've had has never had a problem with them. So for me, here's the point. If you are going to take your rifle, if you're going to build a rifle and you're going to turn it into a beast of a machine that will eat anything you feed it, well, you have to feed it consistently in order for it to do those things. And so the magazine is the way you feed your rifle. I cannot detail for you a problem that I have ever had with any magazine that I have owned. I've never had a spring wear out. I have not had any problems with my followers. I've not had any problems with feeding issues that were magazine related. I've not had any problems that I could in any way associate with magazines. I'd like to think that's because I buy good quality magazines. It may just be because I've been lucky, or I've never run my rifle as hard as I needed to for one of these failures to become self-evident. But if you're sitting there making the choice of which magazine to get, I think that you should avoid spending money on a magazine because it is the budget choice, because it is the cheapest choice, because you're going to get a good deal on it. I think you need to take that out of the equation. And I think you need to make a choice based on which magazine you're choosing, its qualities, qualifiers, all the things that cause it to be capable of doing the job that you are asking it to do, and so forth. And I think then and only then are you going to have good quality magazines. Because even if you spend a lot of money on your magazines, that still doesn't ensure that you're getting the best quality. So I'm not going to go into which one to buy. I think those are very personal tastes. And I do think that to the degree that various builds are unique and different, my good quality magazine may not work for your rifle. And so you need to find out what good quality magazine means for your rifle and buy that. But I do think it's important that you put that on the front of your to-do list when it comes to making sure that your rifle is going to work for you and that you're spending good money and that it's well spent. The last thing, and I want you to know that I've put an Otis cleaning kit here, and it's not because we have our relationship. It's because I do believe in the Otis cleaning kit. I think it's a good quality kit, and whether you choose Otis or not, I think the point is that a good cleaning kit is and should always be a part of a build that you are going to consider. When we were issued rifles in the military, we were issued a cleaning kit. It came in the buttstock. And, honestly, looking that far back in my very dusty memory banks, I can't remember whether it was separately issued or issued as part of the rifle. I would tend to believe it was issued as part of the rifle. But one of our listeners wrote in a while ago, and he pointed out, why is it that you buy a rifle and it does not come with a cleaning kit? Well, I think that's a good question. I think they all ought to come with a cleaning kit. But since they don't, it's incumbent upon us as the owners of these rifles, as the people that are going to go out and operate them at the range, like JW at a shoot house. You have to be able to clean your kit or clean your rifle whenever it needs it, wherever it needs it, because of whatever it is you're doing to it that causes it to need it. And so a good cleaning kit is something I think you should invest in. Now, of course, Otis is something that I like. Peter Palma has been on the show. He has done the MS cleaning kit, and I think he's got an improvement on that is somewhere in the process. I couldn't tell you exactly where, but I know that there are other competitors out there that are trying to get into the portable field kits that Otis is currently occupying that territory, and I don't know who they are, but Brownells does carry a wide variety of them. But get a kit, get something that you can put in a cargo pocket or throw in your range bag, or carry with you in a backpack, so that when you are out doing what you're doing with your rifle, you can maintain it and do some of those basic service things to it. So that's kind of my top 10 list. I think that if you were to, follow the guidance that I provided, and, obviously everybody that listens to the show at some point is going to get to a place where they're more than capable of, running these, traps down on all of these items and picking the things that in their minds make the most sense. But I do think that this is going to be good money well spent for you. And it's something that I think you would find useful for every build that you're going to have come before you from here until you stop doing it. So just to recap, I like the wedge. Creates a stable mating of your upper to the lower. I like the D-ring. It helps with your extractor reliability. I like that superior shooting buffer spring. I think that it adds some, well, let's put it this way. It takes away some of the things that happen in your buffer system that cause feeding issues. When it comes to your bolt carrier groups, I think that now moving towards some of the more sophisticated coatings is going to be important to adding those features to your rifle, and that will just add reliability to its function. I do think a sling is important, and really when it comes down to that military cotton web sling, for essentially less than $15, you can have the very same system that they used to train Marines on. I don't know if they still do. I'll have to talk to my friend who's the combat shooting instructor. But, it is a good, solid foundation. A good sling can be important to your use of that rifle. So the next one is a trigger, a good trigger. And, the AOG defense, I think in my book, really has the best of both worlds in terms of, cost effectiveness and that make it, a step above your standard lower parts kit trigger and hammer. AMB Charging Handle so that you can get at your rifle on both sides and both hands and do what you need to do to operate it. And then the last thing are your more general items. So a field repair kit, good quality magazines, and a cleaning kit. I think with that and those items thought through and incorporated into all of your next builds, you're going to have a rifle that will have fewer and fewer of the problems that most people talk about, complain about, and blame the platform for. And that can only increase your shooting fun. So with that, I want to move on to our Otis Technology giveaway and let you know that the fine folks at Otis have sent over a mountain of rifle maintenance tools. It's not quite a molehill. We've given away a number of them, but maybe it's still a foothill. But maintenance tools and cleaning kits for the AR-15 and AR-10. And, we've been tasked here at the show with giving them away. Watch for special posts on Facebook to get a chance to win some of these awesome products made by Otis Technology. And we'll be giving away a complete MSR cleaning kit in either 556 or 762 in the middle of each month up until Christmas. And during the month of December, we will give away a complete Otis Technology Elite Cleaning System to one lucky listener. So during those alternating weeks, we'll be giving away a host of Otis tools and other cleaning supplies. And we encourage you to keep paying attention to our social media, keep signing up, and win some of these components. So feedback is, I think, probably suffering from everybody's love of summer vacations and getting out and enjoying the black rifles that we all talk about building. But, that being the case, we've had very little feedback other than the guys reminding us that some of the download buttons on the podcast website have been giving us problems. And I think we have those all sorted out. But thanks, guys, for the heads up. We want to make sure you can always get access to the podcast. But we had an email from Ben, and Ben writes in. He says, "Hey, guys, I normally don't love the company-focused episodes, mostly because they haven't been companies I was particularly interested in, as I'm currently in the process of figuring out maximum bang for the buck on a coyote shooting rig." He says, "But I love the Vortex interview. They're exactly what I was looking for in an optics supplier, and I have a feeling that the optics from my Coyote rifle will not be the last thing I buy from them." So he says, "Love the podcast and look forward to whatever you have coming down the pipe." Ben, I think you have pointed out a very important thing for us, and that is, it is only when you guys tell us things like this that we are able to incorporate that into the show. So, Ben, tell me what companies you would like me to talk about. Tell me what companies I could reach out to and get someone on so we can have a meaningful discussion about the things they're doing so you can have more information when you have to make choices. So if there's somebody, anybody, nobody that you'd like us to interview, let us know. Email us at our feedback at AR-15podcast.com email address, and I try to stay on top of them. I try to answer them back, and I try very hard to make sure they all make it into the show so that everybody can benefit. So please do continue to write in as the young ones go back to school, as we settle into our our fall, winter, and spring schedules. I hope that more of you will be spending more time listening to the show and writing in, adding your perspectives and giving us some examples of your experiences and letting us know what's going on. Even though we've been trying to, increase our profile on social media and all the other sites out there, at the core, we still are and will always be a podcast. And so that part of it only benefits when you guys write in and let us know what's going on. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show. Ben, thanks for the feedback. We enjoyed talking to Vortex, and I got to tell you, they really, in my mind, are a company that makes some products I'm willing to spend my money on. Not that Night Force and, Schmidt and Bender aren't, but of course, it takes me a lot longer to save up the money for something like that. Well, wait a minute. Who am I kidding? I still have kids. I don't ever save up money like that. But, Vortex is a good company, and I like their stuff. So thanks for writing in, Ben. And do, Ben, let us know who in the Coyote rig side of things you'd like us to dial up and see who we can get on. We'll certainly try for you. All right. So I talked about feedback. You can send it to us at feedback@ar15podcast.com. You can also send us a recorded voicemail by using the SpeakPipe plugin. It's on the right-hand side of the AR-15 podcast website. We also want you to subscribe and listen to our podcast for free on iTunes or on Stitcher. And we'd also like you to leave us a review so that we can be placed higher in the searches for other potential listeners. That way we can spread this hobby of ours and what we all commonly refer to as black rifle disease. So you can share your pics with us on Instagram at AR15 Podcast, and you can tag your pictures with hashtag AR15 Podcast. Check us out over on Periscope at AR15 Podcast for quick live videos from cool events or casual conversation about ARs. Follow us on G+. To watch us live, I guess that's Google Plus to watch us live. And it's plus.google.com/+AR15 Podcast. Check out our YouTube page, youtube.com/C/AR15 Podcast. Follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/AR15 Podcast. There's a whole lot of these addresses. Anyways, check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network. We really do have some quality programming, and I'm sure that you can find another show to love as much as you love ours. Finally, don't forget to use our Brownells affiliate link for all of your AR-15 parts. You can get there by going to the AR-15 podcast website and going to the parts link. When it comes down to it, it is because you shop through that affiliate link that our show is able to hold its own weight and pay its own freight. Last but not least, since we all shop at Amazon at least once in our lifetimes these days, we'd like you to use the Amazon affiliate link on the firearmsradio.tv and the AR15podcast.com websites so that you can help the show out and the network out to keep bringing you quality programming. So we've had some bites on our invitation to talk to us about hosting. We're going to sort through those and see what we can do to get some more folks and some fresh blood onto the show and just enliven things up as we head on into the fall season here. SHOT Show's coming up. We're starting to get emails preparing us for the media side of things, so we want to hear your thoughts about all things AR as SHOT begins to get roaring. Of course, we love to hear from you anytime you can write something in, so don't forget that this is all about audience participation. And yes, Mike, that does include you. So, guys, everyone, have a great week. We will talk to you then.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.